Mr. Hardie, for 5 minutes, please.
Thank you for today's hearing, and thank you to Gulf War veterans who are here or are watching from home or from the hospital in the case of at least one. I myself am a veteran of the 1991 Gulf War as well as Somalia and 4 other deployments. I developed health issues that began in the Gulf that have plagued me ever since. My experiences are far from unique, and we now know roughly 1 in 3 of us Gulf War veterans are similarly afflicted. In 2010, a landmark IOM report confirmed what we Gulf War veterans already knew. Gulf War illness is likely the result of environmental agents plus other factors. It's not psychiatric, and it's likely that treatments and preventions can be found. Though such a renewed national effort has not yet fully happened, special thanks to Congressman Miller, Michaud, and Rowe, and others for helping fund the Gulf War Illness CDMRP, the only federal research program in the last 2 decades aimed at improving the health and lives of us ill Gulf War veterans. I provide more detail in my written statement. VA's past research, Gulf War research failures have previously been well documented, much of it focused on stress, psychological, and other irrelevant issues, little of it aimed at developing Gulf War illness treatments. As we just heard from Dr. Coughlin, such failures have not been by accident. VA staff misdeeds continued with the recent IOM treatments committee. And last year, as we also have already heard, VA staff effectively killed a first-of-its-kind strategic plan finally aimed at improving the health and lives of veterans suffering from Gulf War illness. VA staff unilaterally whitewashed the plan. Participants, including myself, felt betrayed and having wasted a year and a half. The Research Advisory Committee, in which I serve, unanimously rejected VA's whitewash, declared no confidence in VA's handling of Gulf War illness research, and described even more issues. Secret VA cuts to the Gulf War illness research budget, VA staff misrepresentations to VA leadership in Congress, blatant violation of statutory mandates, prioritizing research not on treatments but on, quote, whether Gulf War veterans' illnesses are linked to Gulf War service. And the RAC has not been allowed to hold a public meeting since then. There are more issues, with details in my written submission. VA staff have initiated a process to create a new case definition for Gulf War illness via a literature review, unprecedented from what I'm told, and in opposition to the strategic plan mentioned earlier. VA staff refused to provide the RAC with more information. VA's medical surveillance of serious Gulf War health outcomes remains broken. VA refuses to implement a 2008 law mandating an MS prevalence study. VA is still not doing obvious infectious disease workups, as exhibited by a recent Iraq War veteran who, after a 4-year battle, was finally diagnosed and treated with Q fever. VA's Gulf War task force includes only VA staff. It operates in secret, and it asks for but ignores veterans' input. VA has failed to publish its quarterly Gulf War and OEF newsletters and claims data reports since 2010. VA continues to exclude Gulf War veterans whose service was in Turkey or Israel. VA continues to exclude from Gulf War veterans benefits Afghanistan War veterans, yet includes Iraq War veterans. VA still hasn't fixed rating problems for fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, with up to 100% ratings for one, but only 40% ratings for both. Yes, you heard that right. And these conditions are presumptive for Gulf War and Iraq veterans, but not Afghanistan veterans. DoD and VA continue to find no evidence for other serious military health issues like burn pits, vaccination injuries, and more. VA staff routinely ignore Congress, the law, and expert advisors, wasting more precious years, squandering experts' time and energy, and further alienating not just their most engaged advisors, but also the very Gulf War veterans they're supposed to be helping. Most importantly of all, VA still has no proven effective treatments for Gulf War illness patients who walk through VA's doors. Where they frequently are still thought to be psychosomatic, VA has only Band-Aids for symptoms and to help cope. Today, we are hearing why. I encourage this body to help right these ongoing wrongs, including comprehensive legislation to help force solutions, reallocation of funding from these non-performing entities, further investigation of their misdeeds, and criminal sanctions for such behavior. We Gulf War veterans have been fighting with VA and DoD for what's right for most of the last 22 long years. We've had countless congressional hearings like this one on Gulf War veterans issues, with more empty VA promises. We've seen laws passed only to see VA staff circumvent them or ignore them with impunity. I hope today's hearing will be different. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Madam Ranking Member, members of the committee, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Hardie, can you explain, in your opinion, why the Research Advisory Committee why the Research Advisory Committee in their latest Institute of Medicine report is flawed?
Yes, thank you for that question. First, I want to recognize that I believe that the researchers, distinguished researchers like the gentleman sitting next to me who served on that committee were well-intentioned. However, VA staff issued a scope of work and committee charge that radically diverged from the law, that effectively prevented, and also effectively prevented what the committee could consider. I believe that these helped to prevented the IOM committee from meeting the expectations of the law. VA staff directed the panel to do a literature review rather than as the law directed, focusing on physicians experienced in treating Gulf War illness. VA staff knew little such literature exists because VA's 2 decades of failures to develop treatments have helped to ensure that fact. Additionally, most of the presenters to the panel focused on psychosomatic issues, stress as cause, and things like relaxation therapies as treatments. Ill Gulf War veterans who called in to listen to that meeting were naturally outraged. VA staff were among the presenters to the committee, including at least one sitting here today. VA staff muddied the waters by directing IOM to include not just 91 Gulf War veterans as the law directs, but many others. And finally, all of this involvement by VA staff is a far cry from previous claims that these panels operate independent of biasing influence from the contracting agency.
Mr. Hardie, can you enlighten the committee on the role of the Research Advisory Committee on Gulf War illness in the preparation of a major survey of Gulf War era veterans that Dr. Coughlin was talking about in his testimony? Were the recommendations that the Research Advisory Committee made regarding the changes to the survey ignored? And what has happened to the survey?
Thank you very much for that question, Madam Ranking Member. The Research Advisory Committee made a number of recommendations early on in when the committee first became aware of that the survey existed. Many of those Office of Public Health staff, including Dr. Aaron Schneiderman that was mentioned earlier, refused to provide the Research Advisory Committee with answers to whether or not that the requested changes had been made. If any changes had been made, refused even to tell our chairman where his office was so the chairman could come and have a private meeting with him. And I was frankly shocked, and candidly, I expressed at that meeting that I hadn't seen such a display of arrogance and insolence, and that I thought that he should be fired. I was absolutely shocked. And so my understanding, when we finally saw the survey that went out, the expert, I'm simply a Gulf War veteran on the panel that's had a lot of experience with these things, but I look to many of the scientists that I find to be brilliant and experts in their field, and had put together a comprehensive survey list and focusing on the important issues to Gulf War veterans, like frankly, Gulf War illness issues. And it did not appear that those issues were being included in the survey. And when we finally saw the survey, it was extremely troubling that much of it was focused on psychological and psychiatric issues. Frankly, it was extremely upsetting for Gulf War veterans.
Do you know where the survey is now?
I think that others may be better suited to answer that question.
Dr. Coughlin.